Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Zero Hour. I'm your host, Richard RJ Eskow. Before we get into speaking with this week's guests, let's talk a little bit about the pandemic from a somewhat different angle than we tend to see on the news coverage. Let's talk about who's dying and who's getting even richer than they were before this thing came along. First, let's start with deaths and disease and how government inaction is making that worse even as we speak. There's an important new study out. A paper was released on November 30th showing that when eviction bans end, more people get sick and more people die. Now, it seems logical to assume that, but this actually puts some scientific rigor around it, and which is why it's so important, because the eviction restrictions we have in place are probably all going to end by the end of the year. Certainly, the federal government has not taken action in that area. So let's look at briefly at what the study says, and then look at who's benefiting while others are struggling. Basically, this study looked at 44 states that instituted eviction moratoriums through a period of, I think, March 13th to September 3rd. What they did was compared the ones that ended their moratoriums with the ones that kept them. And they did that at 10 weeks and at 16 weeks. Here's what they found, that COVID-19 incidents in the states that ended their moratoriums was 1.6 times higher, 60% higher than the incidents in states that kept their moratoriums. That was at 10 weeks after the moratorium ended. At 16 weeks after the moratorium ended, that ratio was more than 2 to 1, or was roughly 2 to 1, which means that, to put it simply, twice as many people will get sick once all moratoriums end, because that's what happens within 16 weeks, according to this study. This is very, very important information because it shows exactly what the sickness penalty is for lifting these moratoriums. Now, let's talk about death. Not to be a bummer, but it's important. Mortality in states that lifted their moratoriums was 60% higher and at 7 weeks, and continued to grow out to 16 weeks, although not quite as dramatically. But overall, that means as a result of ending these moratoriums, 433,700 people got the disease, and nearly 11,000 people died who would not have died if the moratoriums had been kept in place. This is devastating. Meanwhile, the wealthy and corporations have a different problem. Their problem is that the Federal Reserve has done so much to help them get rich that they are now overloaded with wealth. And what I mean by overloaded is very simple. They have so much wealth, they don't have a place to park it anymore. We're now finding a glut of over savings and under investment because the Fed's policies, as well as the government's policies, have boosted corporate revenues and profits. So, well, not revenues, but profits so significantly by making essentially free borrowing money available to them. And if they don't like the rules that go with the zero or essentially zero interest financing, they can go to the private bond markets, knowing full well, those bond markets know full well that if there's any problem, cash flow, because a lot of these are very badly managed companies that don't deserve any success at all, but the bond markets know they can always go back to the Fed for 0%. So a lot of money is flowing to these corporations, and from these corporations to their wealthy stockholders and to their wealthy executives who in so many cases have mismanaged this company. So while people get evicted, leading to more sickness and more death, the rich get richer. And welcome to the United States of America.